but we haven't had apologies from any other member. So I'm hoping that it's just a case of travel and transport problems and that they will join us. But at this moment in time, we are in court. Okay, we will make a start. We've got on screen Mark Smith from ARAC, Councillor Emma Marshall and Linda Horn. Don't think I can see anybody else. Hi, folks. So if we take the apologies that we've received so far for absence, please, Lindsay.
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Amanda Tomlinson and Councillor Waters.
Any declarations of interest as per the agenda? No. And Chair's remarks. So I've got a couple of things to comment on. One, apologies for the mix-up of the papers going out. They went out, they were recalled, they went out, they were recalled. And then when they finally went out last Monday, there was a problem with sending and receiving external emails from the CA. So apologies for this, and particularly being such a large pack of information. If you didn't pick it up till the end of the week, it does make it very difficult to get through on time. So please accept my apologies for that, and we'll hope that that doesn't occur again in the future. There's a remark I was going to make, which had just gone completely out of my mind. Oh, hi, Naeem. It's in there. One more. Okay.
I see. All right.
Okay, we'll move on. If I can remember what it was I was going to remark on, I'll come back to it. Minutes then from the 6th and the 14th of December. The 14th of December, you will remember, was the mayoral Q&A. So if we take them for the 6th of November first, for accuracy, and then for matters arising, page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Obviously, we can't vote on them being an accurate record, but as far as we're concerned in the room, there's nothing that we need to amend. So if we take them then for matters arising, page 1, page 2. So I've just got a quick update on 163A, when I commented the last time that we'd received a letter from the Police and Crime Commissioner that we responded to in the first instance. As you will be aware, that a second letter was received early this year, I think, and we've sent a subsequent reply, which was along the lines of when it was raised by Simon Foster that we previously had called that decision in. The reason for that being back in 2018, I think it was when we last looked at it. That was because at that point in time, to absorb the powers was a decision of the board. So therefore it was completely appropriate that this committee looked at that. Now, of course, it's in the hands of the mayor and the government. So there's no role at this moment in time for this committee. We have said that there may be a role if their powers are assumed in the future to consider the impact on the CA as a whole once we know the model. But at this moment in time, there is no role for this committee. Anything else on page 1? Obviously, we propose for the future draft strategies on today's meeting, as is the account of the scrutiny protocol. Anything from page 3? Andrew?
So we're on 16th minutes, are we?
Yes. No.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
6th, Monday the 6th.
Oh, still on there, right, sorry.
So any matters arising on page 3 from Monday the 6th. And from page 4, I've just got a quick one to raise on 167 on the air quality framework and implementation plan. And it was really about, and Laura might be able to answer this. I've got a query around dissemination of that paper. Does it automatically get sent out to local authority leads once it's been agreed at CA board? The reason I ask that is I had to forward it on to Dudley's lead, which was fine, but I would have expected it to have been automatically sent.
Officer leads. So I would have expected that to have gone by the working group that was across all local authorities before it was finalized, and then certainly a circulation to leaders. But we can double check with the lead officer from our side to make sure finals have gone out.
Any other matters arising on page 5 and the final page of 6? No. Okay, that takes us then on to the minutes of the 14th of December, which was a joint overview and scrutiny Q&A session with the Mayor. Again, accuracy, pages 7, 8 and a little bit on 9. Andrew?
I think it was on one of these pages. I asked the Mayor a question about Walsall Common Relief Road, which is not in there. Now, I asked the question because I know the timing of that, which is potentially within the 3-year medium-term financial strategy. And secondly, I know the broad outline of the quantum, which is it's in tens of millions, and therefore that would potentially impact the budget. The Mayor did respond to that, and it's not minuted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Thank you.
I've just got a general comment to make about the budget meeting. And I have chatted to Lindsay and Dan outside, and I think that it would be probably helpful for future budget scrutiny meetings. Obviously, our own officers provide all of the DA finance issues and where we're at and the figures, but I think it might be really helpful if we perhaps had some bespoke either LGA or Centre for Public Governance or whoever it is who can provide it, some particular additional training around formulating questions and to make them perhaps a little bit more probing than we've been able to manage so far, particularly given that we are going to be scrutinising in the future the single settlement. So I think there's a role for both sets of information, one from our own officers and then one from additional training around the questioning, if that's okay with members. But that's my only comment. So other than Andrew's bit that's missing, anything from anybody else? No? Okay, so those will go to the next board meeting. So on to the mayoral question time, policy response and any observations. That's pages 11 to 14 in your pack. That was the policy response from the Mayor. Does anybody have any observations they wish to make or anything that they wish to feed back on? No?
It's helpful.
Thank you. No, okay, then we'll just thank them there for the response and then send them. Thank you. So that takes us on to Homes for the Future final consideration. As you will recall, this paper was pulled from our last full meeting and is now coming back today for presentation. There's a huge amount of information on it, but I'm handing over, I think, to Leo, who is on screen. Leo, if you can. Leo.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And I'll actually kind of hand over to Mia Higgins, who's sort of led this piece of work to introduce it, and I'll chip in with a little bit of extra context in terms of next steps, the task force, and some of the consultation responses we've received as well. So Mia.
Thanks, Leo. Yeah, so just to give a bit of background on this, firstly, so you will note in the paper, it just sort of says this is quite an ongoing programme now. We've been sort of working on this for the last couple of years. This is essentially in response to the government's future home standard, which had some delayed sort of consultation coming out, but has actually come out just in December now. And so we will be sort of preparing a CA response to that. And essentially, it's just looking at how we can kind of go further than that and how we can also just sort of prepare industry for it. So our approach is looking at specifically the combination of zero carbon homes, also with essentially pre-manufactured value as well, and looking at how we can pair those two together to encourage essentially a shift in the supply chain. So that's the sort of overarching view. How we've gone about this, you'll note there's several documents attached. So for those that attended the technical briefing earlier, I think hopefully that will be a bit clearer in what those documents kind of mean. We essentially have the strategy document that takes you through the overview, why we're doing this, why it's necessary, what the benefits are, what it's going to look like, the impact it's going to have, lots of kind of high level detail. And then we have our technical standard, which provides a lot more information. So it looks into how we're going to make that shift, what's expected. So you'll note in that there's a shift over a three sort of tier period. So we have a statutory level, which is essentially asking people to take the first step in measuring certain factors. So we have three main targets, which is around our sort of energy side. We're looking at our embodied carbon, and we're sort of looking at our PMV as well. And we then have a 2025 and a 2030 standard as well. So we're transitioning over time to sort of help people to adapt to that. What we've also done is tried to keep it quite flexible in the sense that while there are targets there, the means of achieving them is very much up to the individual. So you'll note in there's some potential approaches. So they're just suggestions on how you might achieve these targets, but it is very much up to the individual. And that's so that we don't discourage innovation. It's to ensure that if people are already making moves on this, what we don't want to do is be very prescriptive and say you've got to go about it this way. And then obviously they've already been making shifts towards zero carbon, and we're naturally discouraging that. So that's the kind of thinking behind that, essentially. You'll also just note in the technical standard document, we've also provided some information around how people can provide evidence as well of meeting those standards. So we've tried to be as comprehensive as possible to really support that transition for people and help that understanding as well. You'll also note in the paper that the government's consultation has been released, I mentioned earlier. So that essentially has a date of the 6th of March for us to respond to. So just one of the things that we have asked the board committee to just consider is around the government's consultation and how that does differ from ours. There's quite a lot of information in it. So there is a brief summary in the paper as much as possible, which does compare the government's proposals, their preferred option, because there are a couple, to our standard. It's quite difficult to do in the sense that we're not prescriptive on how it's achieved. So what we've done is we've assumed that we would take a passive design route within our standard in order to match it to what the government's proposals are like, so that we can have a comparison there. Something that we've also noted is that within the government consultation, there are proposals around existing buildings, and also interestingly there are proposals around non-residential buildings as well, something that we don't have in our standards. So that is that part around part G, just asking the committee to consider that point around the response to how we might respond to that, given that it's not actually within our standard. Overall, we're just asking essentially the committee to support this moving forward. Leo's going to take us through the next steps, our implementation phase, what that's going to look like, and also the sort of engagement responses. But yeah, the overall ask of the board today is just to look at essentially how we might respond to that government one, specifically that element that we haven't necessarily addressed in our own standard around non-residential dwellings, and also just the sort of strategy as a whole and the standard as a whole, and how just essentially approving that moving forward. So I'll hand over to Leo now to just take us through the responses and the implementation bit.
Thanks, Mia. Yeah, we're at the stage now where obviously this has gone through a huge amount of development over a long period of time, and will be coming to the CA board on February 9th, I think. We also closed the final consultation period about a week ago, and I think to summarise some of the feedback, which we'll write up more fully for the CA board reports, because it didn't quite match with the timings of getting out this report into the system. Broadly, it's been very positive, and I think it's recognised that this is probably the leading set of policies when it comes to setting standards for operational and embodied energy in new development anywhere in the country, in terms of building regs, planning policy, or in our case, grant condition for our pipeline. Some of the wider feedback as well has been broadly positive from the firms that form the MMC cluster, which has been a kind of key priority for our plan for growth. I think in terms of some more negative comments that we've had, understandably some concern from brick manufacturers and other masonry companies who are making new investments and just wanting more clarity over whether the outstanding portion in our pre-manufactured value standard will cater for their production and incorporation into new schemes. So we're doing a little bit of analysis to kind of answer that question more with greater clarity. And we've also had just some feedback as well from the West Midlands Housing Association partnership in relation to some pilot schemes that they've had. I think some of you might be aware of Project 80, which is a scheme that Midland Heart brought forward, which was generally using traditional build methods, but met very high embodied and operational carbon standards through their post-occupancy analysis. So just the extent to which our standards would preclude approaches like that. So we're kind of open to a certain amount of fine-tuning of those standards between now and final adoption in a couple of weeks' time. We're meeting, hopefully, I think it's in the diary, with representatives from WMHAP later in the week. We've also got our task force that will be developing this agenda going forward. We're doing quite a big refresh of that task force, which has been generally a very kind of productive set of discussions that have helped develop this, from developers, contractors, academia, architects, engineers, so on. I think the key thing to kind of note with the development of that task force that will be overseeing the implementation phase of this is that we'll be creating a subcommittee firstly focused on the delivery and development end of this, so the capacity support that we provide for builders, for material supply, for sharing best practice amongst developers and strategic partners, and also just a separate work stream and subgroup for skills development as well. I think it's kind of noted throughout all of this work that there are real challenges with the supply of skilled labour, particularly in traditional build methods, that has partly been a big contributor to some of the pressures we've seen in terms of construction costs and capacity and hitting viability of lots of the schemes in the region. So we're going to have a really concerted effort to try and tackle those two areas. But I think that broadly sort of sums up where we're up to now. I would kind of just reiterate as well some of the wider context. We've obviously got the national future home standard that is open to consultation now, has a number of areas that don't really align with what we're doing. It prohibits local authorities from going any further than whichever option they land on, which has caused a lot of frustration from areas that want to go further, faster in terms of tackling the built environment contributions to climate change. And there was also not as a concerted standard set for embodied energy, which is one of our key focuses as well. But broadly, there is a kind of emerging alignment, and I feel like we're kind of leading the way really nationally at present, but we've got to adopt it first. So interested for any thoughts from the committee, and just to restate as well, my huge thanks to Mia for all the hard work she's put into this over a long period of time, as well as to the task force who've made kind of key contributions to getting this standard to where it is now.
Thanks very much for the presentation on that. I'll open it up to the committee. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll come in at the end. So, Councillor Mackay. Well, just before we start, we are now called. Councillor Mackay.
Thanks very much, and really interested to hear what you're saying. I'm a big fan of timber frame. I think that it is the future way of building for many reasons. Speed of build is certainly one of the big ones. I was quite interested in here we were looking at sort of conforming to passive house regulations, because you can. I think air tightness is the one that always concerns me a bit, because whilst you don't want to have a leaky house going all the way to get to that level, you know, there's quite a lot of cost to that, and you could still have an amazing property that doesn't quite conforms to everything else, but doesn't quite get the air tightness. I was just wondering if what the view was with us going that far, and would that actually sort of slow down or make it more expensive on some of the builds, and therefore limit some of the sort of properties that we could build by going that far? Thank you very much, Chair.
So yeah, so just to confirm on the passive design side, I mentioned that because that was a way for us to easily compare it with the government standard due to the measurements given. However, that's just one of many ways that you can achieve the targets. So in the technical standard, passive design is outlined as one of the potential approaches, but there are also lots of other options as well. So that's just potentially one method. If it's easier for someone or preferable for them to take another option, yeah, that's also an option as long as they can meet the targets, essentially.
Councillor Warwick.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the challenge of this is obviously to get developers on board and to roll this out, because it is a large change in the technical standards. The thing that we should trumpet in this, I was reading through the documentation at the weekend, and I think it says in there somewhere that a 3-bed family home would cost somewhere in the region of £1.50 a day to run with these new standards. Now, I mean, that really, if there's an argument for me to be pursuing this, that is it, because it's not just the value to the climate in this, it's the actual cost for families to run their home. And I think that's got to be a huge driver for this, particularly in times of energy being more expensive. If we can conserve it and put money back in residents' pockets by saving them that on their energy bill, I can't see anything other than good news with this.
Got Councillor Lumby first, and then I'll come to you. Councillor Lumby.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just looking at 5.2, which gives the options for consultation. I noticed that really, when you go down to the table in 5.3, there isn't a vast difference between the one option and the other than option 2 will probably cost a lot less. And going on from Councillor McKay's question around air tightness, the second option takes out air tightness, yet actually gains a reduction from the 8-point down to 5-point. Although I do note that it talks about high fabric standards. And then just one other little thing, just at the bottom right of that table, it says the WMCA target 2025 says 0.06. Is that a typo, or is that really where you want to go regarding air tightness? Thank you.
So again, these were comparisons with the passive design option. So this is just one of many ways that you could achieve the target. So there are lots of other options as well. So that isn't necessarily something that is going to have to essentially transpire for you to achieve those targets. It's just one way of achieving them. It was purely the way that the government standard was laid out. That was the easiest way for us to kind of make a comparison. That was the best way that we could kind of do it. We've unfortunately, it was quite delayed in the government standard coming out, so we'd already been quite far along with our standard, and even had sort of our event where we had put out our proposals by that stage. So that was essentially the best method we could have of comparison. But yeah, again, you can choose any one of the potential approaches that are kind of listed, or even your own approach, as long as it meets those targets. That's purely optional.
Okay, Councillor Burrow.
Sorry, I've got a few questions here. I just want to understand the decision we're being asked to take. I think there are two decisions. One is, do we support the view that the consultation input ought to be, we're going for option, we'd like the government to go for option one. And secondly, should the West Midlands Combined Authority have an enhanced standard which looks at the embedded carbon in the build for its own sponsorship of decontaminated sites? Have I got that right? Are there actually two decisions we've been asked to review today?
So the one around the government consultation is just for people to consider in how we should respond. So we'll be putting together a response for that. We'll be working with other teams as well, because this does include existing builds. So we'll also get in touch with Retrofit to discuss that. And also the section around non-residential was something that was quite interesting to us, because that wasn't necessarily something that we've covered in this standard. Ours is just focused on residential. So we would like the committee to just consider as part of that how we kind of might respond to the consultation, but we will also be having those internal discussions. And then also the second point would be, yes, around looking at how would be looking around the approval of the WMCA Homes for the Future proposals as well.
Thank you. That then helps me with the next questions. Could you explain why the Combined Authority hasn't looked at either retrofit or the commercial sector? Is that why does our standard not cover that?
So I'm probably not the best person to speak on the retrofit side, because that is covered by the retrofit team. We are doing separate work around retrofit. There'll probably be someone who can speak better to that than me. So there is ongoing work. It doesn't fall under this specific standard, because within the housing team, we deal specifically with the new build element. So that's why it hasn't been covered within that. In terms of why it has sort of covered residential, when the decision was sort of initially made by the board to put this standard forth, that was what was covered, sorry, by Housing and Land Delivery Board, I should say. That was what was covered, was the residential side. It's also the area where we put sort of significantly more funding. So that was the main area that we looked at, hence why it has not fallen under this standard. So that's just a point why now it is something for us to consider, that even if it doesn't come under this standard, how we do kind of respond to that.
Thank you. As long as you're coming back to the retrofit and the commercial stuff at some point, that's fine. Can we have an assurance that moving to the Combined Authority standard will not slow down the building of houses on decontaminated sites? I think there was a target for 18,000 over a period of time. Can we have an assurance that some work has been done which assures us that that work will not slow down due to
Yes.
the cost?
So that's, yeah, absolutely. That's not the goal at all to in any way sort of hinder any form of sort of construction. So what we've done in the report is we have covered the cost side of things to analyze the potential cost. Naturally, because we have provided that flexibility within how you achieve the targets, that will vary. It will also vary based upon things such as the type of building that you are constructing. So whether it's flats, terraced houses, semi-detached. So there will be some sort of fluctuation there. However, there is that cost section of the report that we have addressed. We've also noted as well on some of our funding that comes to an end earlier, that we won't be applying it to that section. So I can't find it in the report at the moment, but there is a table just saying how we will apply it and to what funding. So there is that area as well, where to that section of funding, yeah, it's under 3.7. We're just considering how we do apply that to what type of funding and also what stage in the process. So if people are already quite far along, naturally we wouldn't be asking them to apply this, because this is very much in the design stage. So it's something that would need to be considered from the beginning. So if people are further along in the process, there would be quite a bit of additional costs to ask them to come back and obviously reconsider all of that again. So there's some of the mitigations that we have kind of taken. Also, essentially what we have considered is the transition over time. So how, as we sort of encourage the shift in the supply chain, there will be a move in the direction of these methods becoming cheaper, which will then, in the longer term, reduce costs. So naturally, the prediction of costs up to 2030 is quite difficult because it's quite a long way off, and a lot can change in those times. So they're probably our least accurate estimations, whereas the ones closer to date are presumably going to be more accurate just because we have a better understanding of the market. But we would expect that shift, and a lot of the kind of feedback that we have had in terms particularly around the pre-manufactured value side is that the scale is where people are hitting the kind of barriers. So by us essentially helping to encourage a shift in that direction, hopefully there will be a shift and a move in the direction of the scalability, and then that will support the industry long term in terms of actually making these costs cheaper. Also, I know around funding, and I'm sure Leo will be able to speak more about this, but people probably heard the single settlement funding as well, that is sort of making its way through. So we've also got shifts in how our funds are exactly going to look, which is also going to help support policies such as this.
I have several more, but why don't we allow somebody else a chance?
Yeah, because I'm also very conscious of time with a very packed agenda. So, I mean, it might be that you want to perhaps put those through via email, so that we don't lose them. I've got Councillor Tennant, followed by Councillor Marshall and Councillor Moore. Jamie.
Thank you. As me before, we've heard about the skills and labour shortage in construction, and that skill shortage being more significant when we move to future homes. There is, I can't remember where in the report it is, but there is one reference to the labour market in this report. So kind of what work has been done to make sure that that skill shortage won't undermine the strategy, and is there any cross-cutting work with the skills team in the CA just to make sure that we can actually achieve this? Thanks.
Yeah, so absolutely, skills is a big consideration for us. So within the strategy document, we do just address the issues that the traditional market is having around skills. So things such as an aging workforce, people are tending to retire earlier, especially since COVID. We've seen quite a significant drop in productivity. So there's certainly an element already where the traditional market is struggling on the skills side of things. So certainly with the shift, we're hoping that we can facilitate a skills base essentially, and encourage people into this sort of essentially this type of construction. So part of the work that we're doing there was around what Leo mentioned with the implementation side of things. So we are working with our task force, and we're going to be setting up a skills subcommittee group, a working group that comes off of that task force, and we will bring together sort of skills experts on that. Something we're quite keen to do is that we do develop this in line with these standards. So naturally, the skills that are going to be required will change as the sort of standard changes, the amount in terms of the actual demand for them. So we obviously don't want to create a surplus of skills. So we want to work out how we can get that right and essentially evolve alongside the standard. And we will be working with the skills team on that as well, and bringing them into those conversations. I've already had some discussions with them as well around sort of things such as potential funding. So yeah, we'll absolutely be having those discussions and making sure that we're adapting alongside the standard to ensure that there is that right supply, but also not an sort of excess in terms of skills.
Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. My two quick questions was one around if a property is too airtight, how do we protect it from mould in the then coming years when it's actually being used? And then the other one is if we are asking for standards which are beyond legislation, national legislation currently, are we protected if there are appeals against planning applications being refused if they don't want to meet these standards? So that's the two things: is protecting ourselves from appeals and mould. Thank you.
Yeah, so the first one is specifically in reference to the passive design one. So again, that's just one option. However, what we've often found with cases such as this is it sounds kind of silly, but there's essentially a problem with people understanding how to use the home because of the airtightness, which can then lead to sort of certain problems. So that's certainly something that we can discuss as part of even potentially our actual skills discussion around an actual education of how to use these homes. Naturally, they do function differently to traditional homes that people are used to, and as such, we do often see that people don't necessarily use them in the way that they should to get the best from them. So potentially that's something that we can cover as part of that implementation process as well. Around the legal side, I know we have a legal section in the report, which might cover some of those questions. I wouldn't be sure without reviewing it, but if not, that's certainly something that we can go back to our legal team with, because I think they'll be better to advise.
I can just jump in as well a little bit on that second question also. So this isn't a standard that necessarily overlays with planning policy and planning permissions that are given and so forth. We're not setting a standard for different planning authorities across the region to apply, though obviously we will always encourage alignment where we can in our discussion with senior planners across the region. This is purely for access to WMCA grant. So it's a kind of different lever, albeit one that sits alongside planning policy. So any appeal in terms of a consent that's not given because it doesn't meet these standards doesn't really necessarily attend to what we're doing here. We don't obviously have strategic planning powers in the West Midlands CA at present. So just to kind of clarify that it sits separately in terms of planning permission and so on.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
And Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Chair. The report, if I've read it correctly, implies there's going to be a short to medium term impact on developers in terms of costs and also in terms of potentially actually the number of people seeking assistance from the combined authority. I would concur that this probably means that it's more likely that actually larger developers are going to be able to access grants going forward on the basis of the standard proposed. I think small builders and medium builders have a big role to play in terms of meeting the combined authority's housing target as well. And really what I'm seeking some assurance on is that we're not just creating a charter, if you like, or a strategy for big developers.
Yeah, definitely. So that's not something that we want to do, discourage SMEs at all. So part of the work that we're looking to do in the implementation plan, one of our working groups is going to be looking at specifically working with those kind of SMEs within the region, making sure that they do understand the standard. So some might not necessarily have the sort of teams to consider policies such as this. They might not have the sort of expertise in this type of delivery. So it's for us to work with them and be as transparent as possible about how the standard works, how it will be applied. And naturally, as with all of our sort of sites, we will have those individual discussions. So our development managers will have those discussions about essentially the viability, how these factors are applied. So there's always the individual discussion that will be had there and considered. And certainly within some of it, the earlier asks, it's around considering to apply certain elements and it's around measuring. So it's less of an actual application. But yeah, that's certainly something that we have been aware of. And that's the kind of discussions that we're going to be having, is make sure that they're at the forefront of being able to have those discussions directly with us and us being able to support them in any way that we can in terms of actually adopting and understanding the standard.
Very quick question from Councillor Mackay.
It's more of a comment you'd be glad to know, so it's even quicker. Well, I'm a member of the Institute of Wood Science and Timber Trade from a background, and I set up a timber frame company back in the day. And in my experience, and obviously things move on, the smaller builders, especially self-builders, SMEs, that they're right across timber frame because they get very good quality build from it, etc. The larger builders are aware of it, especially the big ones. It's skills that is generally what holds back the timber frame and things like that. Wimpy Homes, for example, they used to build timber frame for their show homes because it was quicker to do. They could get it up and get on site quicker, but then roll back to traditional forms of build on site just because that's where their skill base was, getting all the carpenters and getting etc. timber frame people on site for the way they wanted to build was the problem. And I'm not sure if that's the case today, but certainly picking up a point just there, the smaller builders, SMEs, self-builders, etc., they're right across timber frame just because of the speed and it's also cheaper to build than a traditional brick and block. That was helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So looking at what the committee are asked to approve, I think we've made some really valuable comments into that report, and hopefully some of those will be picked up and included in the board, particularly I think around the assurances that have been sought around Councillor Moore's comments and around Councillor Marshall and Councillor Burrows. Councillor Burrow will put a couple of these additional questions through if they could be responded to outside of this meeting, please, just because of the time that we've got this morning. So I think we've certainly done 1, 2, and we had a little bit about the feedback on the launch event from yourselves, although I am surprised that there was nothing that you've commented that there was nothing formally responded to. Just you had informal comments made at the launch event itself, as stated in 4.4. So I guess the thing that we need to do from this committee is endorse the official release of the CA's hope for the future proposals. So do I have agreement that we are endorsing that with all of the assurances that we have sought this morning?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, committee. We've considered the release of HMG's future home standard. We've noted progress, and we've considered WMCA's response to the standard as well. So thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, committee, for some really useful comments and points on what is has been quite a technical and bulky report to get through. Thank you. So moving swiftly on, we are moving on to West Midlands State of the Region, and we have Steve to present that report to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just going to put some slides on the screen as well, so you can see what this. So the West Midlands State of the Region report is a high-level overview, annual review of the condition of the West Midlands. The intention of the report is to provide that context to help understand the region's performance, and it brings to attention some of those opportunities and challenges in our region. So to say that this is not a performance report, the intention is that it provides that context to help understand what's happening in the region, and it also helps us fulfill the requirement under the West Midlands Combined Authority Order 2016 Schedule 3.4 in terms of our requirement to prepare analysis of the economic conditions of the region. The ask of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is to consider some of the key messages set out in the report, identify what you might wish to address as part of your work programme, and also we intend to take this to the WMCA board on the 9th of February. So if there's anything that you want to bring to their attention, the intention that this will be the chance to raise some of those issues for the board to consider. The intention of the report, the way that we've written it, is to try and make it accessible to lots and lots of different audiences, primarily obviously to our members and our boards, but we want to write it in a way that's accessible to people, communities, business organisations, and also wider government stakeholders, and so that we're bringing it formally to these boards, but we are also putting in interactive, immersive type experiences online over the coming months to help bring the report alive, really. The report that you've got is structured around inclusive growth fundamentals, setting out which were approved by the WMSA board back in 2018, setting out how we're building a better connected, more prosperous, fairer, greener and healthier West Midlands. And if it's okay with the chair, I'm hoping to run through some of the key messages of the report for your information. So in terms of the report, firstly, it sets out about our demographics, latest information from the last census with some additional data that's been released since the census as well, talking about the diversity of the region and also the change in the population over the past decade. In terms of the climate resilience fundamental, we talk about declining carbon emissions. You've seen that the latest data, which unfortunately is delayed, so the latest data of 2021 does show a slight rise in emissions, but the overall trend in terms of decline in emissions has continued, with the message being that there's equality impacts that we must be aware of because of its disproportionate impact on some of the more disadvantaged and deprived communities as well. In terms of the messages around inclusive economy, it talks about the overall growth of the West Midlands economy, but also the challenges post-pandemic in that the growth was not quite returned to the pre-pandemic trajectory, but also the differences within our 7 local authority districts in terms of per capita GDP, in terms of household income and so forth. Some of the key messages around power participation speak about challenges in terms of people's voter turnout, views in terms of people's satisfaction with the way that the regions run and so forth, with the key messages being actually we need to take advantage of the powers that the deeper devolution dues give us and create a system that really brings powers back to the people and communities in our region as well. In terms of affordable and safe places, it talks about the growth in terms of homes that's been built. So we can see that 5% of homes have been built since 2016, contributing to a target of 215,000 homes by 2031, with 20% being affordable. It also talks about some of the challenges in terms of crime and antisocial behaviour as well, and also increase in terms of the increasing cost of living and its impact on households and families in the region as well. In terms of connected community section, the report talks about the growth in terms of trips by active transport modes. So 35% of journeys in the West Midlands Combined Authority area are through active travel means. And while that's nowhere near what happened in the pandemic, it's still an increase from the 2019 region. It also recognises the importance of digital connectivity as well as physical connectivity, and it shows how we're amongst the best connected regions as well. In terms of education learning, obviously with one of the responsibilities of combined authorities around the adult education budget, and but this report talks more broadly about what's happening in terms of young people into higher education as well, showing quite positive progress with the increase in young people entering higher education, and also narrowing the gap with England as well. And moving on to health and wellbeing, challenges around people having shorter life expectancy at birth than the England average for both men and women, and the impact that has in terms of our economy's ability to sustain people facing poor health. In terms of equality, this then looks at some of the intersectionality between the 7 other fundamentals and how that impacts differently across our region in terms of gender, ethnicity and disability pay gaps, as well for different parts in terms of access to job, access to education, access to transport and so forth. And then the report then brings all that together with a number of recommendations that tries to bring to attention those opportunities and challenges in the region. I'm not going to go through those in detail now, but a lot of this will be accessible on the WMSA website after it's gone through approval from various boards and committees. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And I think it's been really helpful taking this report and the skills report today, because there's some real, when you read the two reports, there's some real linkages there, aren't there? So I think that's really helpful in terms of context. Do I have any comments, questions from members of the committee? Oh, Councillor Marshall on screen.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking obviously at the report, and thank you for that. It was more of a, you've used donut economics in this for the donut. I'm just wondering, is that something that's been a political push? Because obviously using donut economics is quite a political way of looking at things, and to see it on here and not had kind of seeing that this is a way that's been going and being, has been endorsed by the board. So whose decision was it to decide to use donut economics rather than other ways of doing it? Thanks.
I'll bring in Laura on this to respond. Laura?
So the donut economics is the visual way to do it, but what it's referring to is our inclusive growth framework, which has been adopted by the board, which we use to make sure that all the investment that we make in the region benefits everyone and is as inclusive as possible. So the principles of that are something that is part of the combined authority. And I can go back and find when the board agreed it, but I would suggest it was even so long ago that it might have been my predecessor. So, there you go, 6th of September 2018 was when inclusive growth was adopted as part of the sort of framework that we use in the combined authority.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks. Any other questions from members of the committee? Councillor Kettle?
I'm sorry I'm late, I do apologise. Just a comment that the figures appear to be about at least 2 years old, and things have moved on. And I think it's essential that the economic viewpoint, the economic picture of the West Midlands is shown quite openly to everyone. To say that we need not give us this kind of data, this is, I think, a negative. I believe this kind of data is essential to us, frankly. That's the only comment I got, in that the figures to me are somewhat outdated already.
Okay.
Thank you. We are completely aware that the figures are not as updated as they could be, and that's where in the deeper definition D, we're making representations to government about how we get access to much more up-to-date data. So where possible, we've included some of those fast-moving metrics, such as exports, such as in terms of our employment and unemployment rates, but unfortunately the bigger figures around gross domestic product is indeed not ideal, and the representation the government have been saying is around data parity with London, because we know London get this, and West Midlands should really get the same type of up-to-date data as well. Thank you.
If I may come back, in my experience is that London is often behind the trend, and I think if we work much more local, have you worked with Delmond White here at all?
Yes, absolutely. So Delmond White's absolutely essential in terms of and the economic intention is absolutely essential to production of this report.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions that I wanted to a bit of clarity around. So really around some of the measures, and page 153 in our pack, education and learning and current conditions. It talks about out of work benefits and measuring against out of work benefits. Do you also, or is the capacity to measure against in-work benefits, because we have lots and lots of people in the region who may well be in very low pay, low skilled work, and they need to be claiming in-work benefits in order to survive. So actually, I think having that as a measure within that would give us an additional, clearer picture. Is that feasible?
Thank you. I'll go back and revisit that, and we can add.
Sorry, I'm happy to take that. It is definitely something we look at as well, because you're right, the number of in-work claimants are increasing, particularly predominant in certain industries, particularly prevalent for females and for minority ethnic groups, some sectors like care, for example. You'll see when we come on to the next item as well, that around that we do pick up some of those specificities, and that is something that we look at and we work with. Yeah.
I just think it probably needs capturing within the State of the Region report, so that we have a clearer picture and understanding of that. The other question I got was the following page, when we talk about school absences. We don't pick up the rates of homeschooling, which have absolutely skyrocketed. Now, maybe that's because the figures are, the way you are able to collect the data is behind the curve, but given after the pandemic, we have seen, and I know it's across the country, huge rates of increases in homeschooling, which we won't see the impact of that yet, but we will have that impact further down the line. And I think we need to be very cognizant of the risks that poses to future workforces.
Thank you. We'll go back with the statistics and see what we can add about homeschooling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Raptor.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the provision, this map on page 139, where all the 7 maps you've got figures on it, and people living in most 10 most deprived area in England. Can you tell us what the sources of this data here, please?
So this data remains the 2019 English indices of deprivation. We do have some access on more up-to-date data in terms of income deprivation, but that would not be quite as comprehensive as the English indices of deprivation data in 2019.
Yeah. So this is about 4 or 5 year old then, the data we're talking about. I mean, looking into this one, almost half the Birmingham lives in the 10 most deprived areas. So is there anything we can actually offer the Birmingham local council to actually improve that, to get these people out of the region?
Thank you. I think there's a lot of things that we've been doing, and the report tries to frame this in the inclusive growth fundamentals for that reason of seeing some of those cross-cutting things that we can be doing. So, for instance, how do we make sure that when we grow our economy through the things identified in our plan for growth, how do we make sure that those job opportunities are accessible to people in the region? We think about affordable and safe housing. How do we make sure that we're building new housing, the earlier agenda item, in a way that benefits communities? Next item on skills as well. For instance, how do we make sure that these communities have access to those skills? And we also think about how that interfaces with the transport network, so that they can actually get to places of work and places where they can study and so forth, really. So I think there's a lot that we can do in the region, and taking that control to improve lives of people in Birmingham, but also the rest of the West Midlands as well.
Do you have any other comments from any other members of the committee? Okay, I mean, I think one of the things that we're asked to consider is identifying areas for next year's work programme. Is there anything in this report that anybody would like to pick up as a separate agenda item for next year's work programme? It might be that you want to email myself and Lindsay after the meeting if there's nothing that springs to mind currently, but Councillor Kettle.
The numbers of people that have to commute for work within the West Midlands area, and the deflationary effects of commuting, I think, are vastly underrated. And we had a discussion a couple of years ago on air quality, which was brilliant, but it gave us an insight to the costs of what congestion was actually costing us. And I think that's an economic experiment or item to look at. The number of people who have to commute, the distance they commute, the amount of another aspect is the unburned fuel that's almost dissolving our roads. The huge impact of what commuting does to our whole environment, economic and otherwise. I think commuting should be part of our remit, to be frankly.
Probably part of the whole discussion or a wider discussion around connectivity, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the ability and air quality and those coming together.
I've been trying to find it. I was looking at it yesterday and I thought, we got transport in it, but we haven't got the commute and the effects of the commute in there. And I think it needs to be there.
Thank you. So we can consider that for next year. Anything else, Mandy? I mean, presuming this is something that you prepare once a year, is it? Yeah. So, I mean, as a report, I think it would be good for this to come back next year because actually we pick up a lot of the issues in other reports that we see. So a lot of the skills and education, the air quality on climate. And I think it's actually, there's a piece in here which I think we would want to consider is around the assurances that we've had about retrofit, because obviously that's absolutely critical to people thriving within the West Midlands, and we have a significant number of homes that require that retrofit to be able to be healthy homes. Okay, and any issues or recommendations other than the additional measures that we've considered to go to board? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. And we'll accept that I propose then that we accept the report and the recommendations. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you very much for that. So that brings us on to the employment and skills strategy for devolution. Over to yourself, Claire.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. Just a quick reminder, we did a regional skills strategy back in 2018. We've not done a regional strategy since. We've done a sort of budget specific one on adult education budget, but as we move into deeper devolution, it was time to take a look again and refresh across. So we've put together an employment and skills strategy for the region. We will have a separate underpinning functional strategy for the adult skills budget as the deeper devolution, because this is slightly broader and more encompassing. We've heard through our discussions here, we've heard about careers and lots of the other things that form the wider employment and skills system that we don't technically have in the deeper devo deal, but this tries to set out our wider ambition for employment and skills and set that framework for the next 3 to 4 years around that. So Fiona's just going to take you through a little bit of the detail at headline level of what's in there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. You will all have a copy in the papers of the draft paper. Just to say this is a working document that we shared with you, so some developments have been made and the intention is that it goes to CA board in February, but we would welcome your comments just before we submit that final version. As Claire says, it's built on our previous adult education budget strategy. It's very much thinking about our move into a single settlement, and it has been developed in consultation with our local authorities, with our colleges, universities, voluntary and community providers, employers. We've had some effective consultation, but also it captures the work that we've been doing actually across the past year, where we've been developing each of our areas of work to think about how we better align the spending that we have with the needs of the region and the impact that we can make through devolution. So what you will see in the strategy, changed on my screen, but not on yours. Ah, there it is. Okay, so over the next 3 years, just a slight delay there. There are 4 main priorities within the strategy. So firstly, thinking about building strong and inclusive communities. We all know that investment in adult learning, yes, it has economic benefits, but there are broader benefits too on our families, communities, health and well-being, cohesion, trust, tolerance. What we want to do is make sure that whilst we are supporting the economic benefits of the region, we are thinking more broadly too. So thinking about strong and inclusive communities, thinking about providing a good education for adults up to level 2. What we would hope actually is that our young people come out of the school system with that in place, but actually too many don't, and there are many adults who've already left the school system, and we need to make sure they've got good second opportunities here. A third strand about supporting residents into employment and then supporting career progression, that point about low paid work and low skilled work. We need to make sure that those residents who are in insecure work, low paid work, have opportunities to continue their career progression. And then fourthly, very much thinking about future skills needs, perhaps as a result of automation, technological change, environmental, economic change through upskilling and reskilling opportunities. Our ambition, which drove our work in the devolution deal, is to try and create for the West Midlands Combined Authority area an integrated employment and skills system for the region. We want to stimulate economic growth, we want to get better outcomes for residents and businesses, we want to make sure we've got healthy, thriving communities. The final element of our strategy is about thinking not just about those priorities, but how we create an effective ecosystem where it works together in order to make sure we've got the right capacity and capability for the challenge ahead. I won't go through these slides in details, but what we have done on the next 4 slides is just to take each one of those priorities, we'll catch up in a minute, and it identifies some of the things that we have done to date. So we're very mindful of the work that we have done, and there's been some significant work since devolution to be able to reframe our skills investment to improve outcomes. And then we want to build on that with a kind of ambitious agenda with new areas to focus on. So in strong and inclusive communities, we want to engage those people who are currently underrepresented in learning, engage them, but also progress them through to level 2. We want to work much more with the voluntary community sector. We want to tackle digital exclusion. We want to think about improving our outcomes for residents who need to develop their English language skills to make sure that they can integrate into community and into the workplace. And we want to think about the locations that offer is made through employment and skills hubs in all of our community settings. In terms of providing a good education up to level 2, we really want to transform the delivery of this offer. It's where we spend most of our money, but actually at the moment we focus on individual qualifications, and we want to think about a broader programme that helps all of our residents with the skills that they needed to thrive in life and work. That will involve reducing the proportion of residents with no or low qualifications. About 1 in 10 at the moment, those people really risk being left behind unless we tackle that. Thinking again about literacy, numeracy, language and digital skills, but a particular focus of those in low paid work. Much of our offer is focused on those outside of the labour market. It's really important. If we don't spend our money there, no one will. But actually we do have this growing cohort of people in work, but in poor, insecure work that we need to help progress. And then we want to think about how we improve learner outcomes. So not only are people taking part in our provision, but they are being supported to move into further learning and work. In terms of moving residents into employment, supporting career progression, so we're going to focus on improving labour market participation. You'll have heard a lot in the news about economic inactivity. So we want to help people get into work and then progress into good work. We want to help progress people out of low pay into good jobs. Thinking particularly about those who are ill or have a disability. That's a growing challenge across the economy. A big proportion of those who are economically inactive or unemployed have some form of health condition or disability. We have to tackle that if we are going to increase the size of the labour market and improve people's opportunities. And we really want to focus on tackling youth unemployment. That is going up across the country. It's particularly an issue in this region, and it really limits young people's opportunities both now and throughout their careers. So it's a major focus for us. In terms of meeting future skills needs, we have set a real focus on increasing the proportion of residents qualified to level 3. That is the level at which you see real impact in terms of your chance of getting a job, of earning more, of being healthier, of business resilience and productivity. And we'll also be investing at this level by thinking about leadership and management skills of our residents, again, to help them progress in work, but to improve productivity of our businesses. And then thinking about a training offer at levels 4 and 5. This is where we think the growth in our economy will come, and we need to make sure that more of our residents have those opportunities. That will involve doing a set of policy work to think about how we stimulate demand there, but how we increase our training offer. We do have, through our skills investment, a substantial amount of money, but the challenge is significant, and we need to find ways of encouraging employers to upskill and reskill their workforce and to invest their own money. And through some of the arrangements that we have through the devolution deal, I think we can advance there in advance of what is happening nationally, and that's certainly the challenge that we will be setting ourselves. There's a lot more detail in the strategy, but happy to take any questions and comments on any of it.
Okay, open to committee. I've had Councillor McKay indicate first.
Thanks very much, Chair. I agree completely that skills is probably the key to everything, because if everyone's skilled, the jobs come with that, and the money they spend in the community then benefits everyone else. The question I was going to ask really was, as far as I'm aware, our young children coming out of education are actually are nicely skilled. I think you'd always like them to have more, but actually the problem doesn't seem to be those coming out of education. It's the older generations that are the difficulty here. And I was just wondering if that was the case across the region, and then basically what you're doing from the other one, just basing that on the dashboard that I've seen for Birmingham, we get the figures for that, and the figures coming out there show that actually, the youth coming out of education are coming out with some reasonable qualifications there. The difficulty is the older generations who don't have the skills, and then it's how you get them skilled up to be able to get what you need. Thanks very much, Joe.
Yeah, I think you're right in one way, but I don't think you can always correlate skills with qualifications. So there are some pockets where educational attainment is rising. There are still too many young people that come out without maths and English at the requisite level, though, even though overall their scores might be okay. And what we've seen with the curriculum for post-16, particularly apprenticeships and T-levels, everybody requiring that magic grade C in old money or 4 or 5 in the new money, and that's where we've got a real gap in attainment still. And what we've been then is the routes being narrowed. So those kids that get it, brilliant, I've got all the options available to them, but there's fewer options for those who don't. So the older apprenticeships, the older style ones that were at the lower levels, have mostly disappeared. So we're seeing the consequent rises in things like youth unemployment, because for those that come through and do okay, that's great, but we're seeing a greater proportion of those who are not in English and maths is a particular issue.
Yeah, I heard a stat the other day when it comes to apprenticeship degrees type things, that it's easier to get into Oxford and Cambridge than it is to get onto some of the apprenticeship degrees, just through the shortage of spaces that are available. So yeah, take what you're saying.
Councillor Tennant.
Thank you. Just a couple. So you referenced, after making a report, a couple of the big challenges. It'd be useful to know what is the list of kind of the most common and the biggest challenges that are barriers to progressing in skills or getting people into skills. Is it sold? Did it travel to colleges? So just kind of knowing what the biggest challenges are, which I know isn't all of them. And the second is, how do we benchmark against similar regions? Are we more or less skilled than Greater Manchester, for example? Those are first two.
Yeah, small questions. It really varies by place and by group of people. I say one of our biggest challenges is that despite the economic change and therefore the need for people to continue to learn and update their skills, most adults aren't doing that, and therefore there's a real challenge around engaging people. Yeah, so it's about accessibility, affordability, relevance, and helping people make that first step. So we're really trying to think about how do you engage adults in learning and then give them really good progression routes through from where they are to the sorts of opportunities that we need to have them. Now, within that, then comes some individual barriers around health, which is a growing issue actually. And then for certain groups, yes, you're right, around language, around basic skills. What we're trying to do is move away from just funding qualifications to programmes of learning that have a wraparound to ensure that once people are engaged, they've got the right support to succeed. And we're trying much more to tie, and we've been able to do this through devolution, to tie our training to the labour market opportunities that are here now and the ones that we know will come in the future. The West Midlands as a region is often below average on so many metrics. I would say, though, through devolution, we have been able to accelerate our progress. And I think particularly in this area, and I can say it because I haven't been here as long as some of my colleagues who've done most of this work, we are seen as a front runner on skills and employment across the devolved areas and really setting the tone of what can be done through devolution.
Not just a couple of questions for you. When you talk about increasing employer investment in training, and when I've read the paper, it's absolutely shocking that how employer investment in employees has gone backwards in the last 10 years. Is there any ability under the devolution deal to be able to incentivise employers? And the reason I ask that is, you know, where we have a lot of people employed in the kind of hospitality and the service sector, retail, generally it's a lower skill, it's a lower pay environment. But actually, if those people had the ability through work to have additional training, it potentially improves their life opportunities, but it also gives their employers more scope for progression. But we have to be realistic that where we have somebody perhaps undertaking a couple of part-time jobs, the ability to do that in their own time is probably not there. So first question is, do we have the ability to incentivise employers alongside expecting them to make some additional funding available? And the second question comes back to the issue around schools and school leavers and the problems that we've certainly seen in the last 3 to 4 years around the increase in young people suffering with mental health, non-school attendance, the rise in homeschooling. We probably haven't seen the impact of that coming out of the education system yet, but we will do. So is this strategy robust enough to manage that rise and those difficulties going forward? And is there any capacity within the CA to be working more closely with statutory education to improve those, you know, to help that, to aid that understanding about the importance of partaking in statutory education?
Lots in that.
Yeah.
First one around employers. Yes, there is some elements of being able to incentivise employers, and that's the whole point of joining up with Business Growth West Midlands, so that the offer to employers is led through there, and then the other programmes, you know, incentives and support for businesses. So skills isn't seen as something separate; it's seen as, you know, and part of business productivity and business improvement. So yes, I think one thing to remember about the adult education budget, it is an individual budget, not an employer-led budget. So whilst we provide individuals with the skills they need to be productive at work or progress in the workforce, it is about the individual choosing, not the employer dictating. The entitlement remains with the resident. And you're right, and to the earlier question from Councillor Tennant as well, it's people in employment, those busy people with 2 jobs and a family and other things, those are the people we really want to be able to get to, but they are the people who are really time poor and struggle. So a lot of what we've been trying to do with our offer is about how do we streamline and change the offer for them. So online doesn't work totally for everybody, but blended does sometimes, and also getting people to be able to think that it is for them. So we're increasing the investment we make in a different way of delivering, so it's not all full-time in the classroom in the day. So we've got to have a much better offer, and that's a big part of our strategy. So yes, to incentivise employers. I suppose the one thing I would say, a lot of those jobs, if people do get increasing qualifications, they will leave. So sometimes the incentive isn't really there for the employer to train their workforce, because they don't increase the pay rates. So we're really focusing on, particularly on other industries like care, for example, where there are clear progression routes through jobs and higher paid jobs where you can become a supervisor or move into NHS roles, but staying within the workforce. So there are clearer progression pathways, I suppose. So yes, in some of those instances where there's a commitment to being able to promote people in line with that. On the schools, you're right. I mean, the latest Youth Employment UK Youth Census shows us some of the indications you're talking about how young people are coming through in terms of their mindset and what they're thinking, that the predominance of mental health issues. And you're right, I don't think we have seen that impacting yet later. We don't have a statutory function there, which is the thing. So in some ways, to be honest, it's what comes through when we get to 19. So we do work with our local authorities, but local authorities again still have a limited reach because of the academisation of schools. So again, they don't have maybe the direct route into schools and the improvements they would, but it is something we're very cognizant of, and it's something we will continue to have national policy discussions with and discussions with colleagues regionally. The other thing that we haven't discussed that I think is an increasing trend, particularly in young people, and we're starting to see, is SEN as well. And whilst we can do lots of work thinking about these areas, the cost of supporting some of those issues and addressing those issues is quite significant and is beyond our current budget allocations as well. So a lot of challenges for us there.
Is there anything within the single settlement that would make that any easier? No. That's useful to know. Councillor Burrow?
Thank you. I'm really interested in this area. If we fix housing and fix skills, I reckon society would be an awful lot better. The thing that worries me about this, when I read it, was other papers talk about we're short of construction skills in the West Midlands. And that every time we meet, we talk about that. It comes up again and again and again. And what I don't see is an alignment in numbers terms between what are we doing that actually is meeting those skills deficits, and are we actually making any dent on this problem? And I would really like to see some numbers around that in future that actually says this is where we think the holes are, this is what we think the gap is, here are the number of people that are going to be going out of that profession over the next few years, and here's how we are getting into doing some stuff. I think they call it workforce planning, but one of the great things about devolution is we ought to be able to do that across the West Midlands, whereas nationally it's a nightmare. I would really like to see something. Level 2 is the critical skill in building houses. Not level 3, not level 4, and certainly not Latin level 5. Level 2s are plumbers, basic electricians, chippies, bricklayers, plasterers. Every skill that you need to build a house is level 2, apart from putting in the consumer unit for the electrics. It is all basic stuff. And whilst I agree maths and English are also level 2 and absolutely critical because you can't do anything else, without those basic skills, you cannot build houses. And I suspect, but I do not know, that if you are building houses using modern factory built components, that is also level 2, because that strikes me as something that chippies would do with banksman skills, i.e. you would be craning stuff onto site. I would really like to see numbers that actually demonstrate that what we are doing as a combined authority is actually cracking those real key issues down at that level. Thank you.
I can happily give you numbers and specifically I'll come to construction in a minute. The strategy is not the place for the thing you've talked about in our opinion. We will do detailed investment plans and we do investment plans. Combined Authority has committed through deeper devolution deal to do its place-based strategy, so working with local authorities about what does this mean in each locality and what is needed, and that's exactly where those discussions will happen about I guess, aggregate workforce planning across a region. Just on the construction, it's probably been our biggest area of investment since taking on the skills in terms of increasing. And you're right, we've done a lot in that. We can certainly give you those figures. Just that level of prescription is probably not what you would see in a strategy, because we'd have to do it for absolutely everything. And I say that sits underneath, and that is in the detailed planning with our local authorities about where the investment takes place. You're right in a lot of what you say about building houses. Lots of the occupational standards, though, that industry has set with IFE are set at level 3 for a lot of those constructions, not at level 2. That's not us, that's where they have been placed. So there's something on that. And whilst construction is really critical, I'm always really cognizant it's a very male dominated industry as well, and we need to be applying the same kind of precision across lots of sectors if we're talking about our residents and wanting people to earn better and do that. So we do that, but we have to do it across all of our sectors, our foundational economy and our areas of plan for growth as well.
So I use construction because it's something I know about.
Yeah.
And I've actually got a level 2 sitting guilds in plumbing and the associated electrics. And I get fined for 10 years, making quite a lot of money doing that at the age of 50. So to me, this is something you can do. Now, I don't know what it is that industry says it wants. What I know is what the actual practice is on site. And I represent an area which is very well off and has enormous demands for these kinds of skills. And our area is too expensive for most tradesmen to live in. So what we are going to do is actually import into Solihull tradespeople who actually live in Birmingham and provide jobs in Birmingham. And to me, just looking at this local authority by local authority, we need to be a little bit careful of that. I mean, one of the big growth areas in Solihull is around the airport. And that most of the people that will end up working there in the level 2, level 3 jobs will not be coming from Solihull. They'll be actually coming from parts of Birmingham. In actual fact, they might actually come from further than that, given the transport network that enables you to get there. So we really need, and it's not just about construction. I just don't know enough about the social care side to actually comment on it, but we need those numbers for every single section so we can actually know that we are driving to the right thing. So otherwise this is paper, and what I want to know is, are we really getting there? I mean, my job is to scrutinize and say, is this delivering? I can't tell without the numbers.
Yeah, no, recognise everything you're saying. We did do a deep dive of the adult education budget where all the numbers were provided. This is a strategy setting the direction for moving forward. More than happy to provide numbers, Chair, on anything you want, but this is a strategy for direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was going to comment on is actually, yes, we did do a deep dive on skills, and it might be something that you want to, we have a specifically focused paper come back next year on to ensure that, because obviously, you know, if we endorse a strategy, we want to know that that strategy is going to be working over the 3 to 5 years or however many years it is that the plan is in place. So actually, I would want to see evidence coming back at future meetings that that strategy is working, and I think we can maybe pick that up in the next municipal year.
Also, Chair, if I'm developing a strategy, I want to know what the current problem is. And I personally have sat on this board now for 18 months, and I don't actually know how we deliver it. So I have no idea whether this is the right approach or not, because I don't know what we're currently doing in terms of, is it really working? And that's the point I'm trying to make, which is, where are we? How successful are we? Are we actually getting there in the key job opportunity areas across the West Midlands, and how well are they matched to the people that we've got who currently have no life chances? But if we could give them some life chances and get them in there, that would really help those people out. Thank you.
Any comments from yourselves? Okay, so I mean,
Can I, sorry, could I come in on that, please? Put my hand up, sorry,
Sorry.
before we went. Sorry. Is that okay? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
So thank you. I want to come back with a challenge really, and what was just said about you know, the difficulty with construction being that it's a mainly male-dominated field. Well, I find that actually quite offensive, because actually I'm a mom of 3 boys, and women have children and women have male children, and we want to see success for our male children. Women have husbands and we want to see a success for our husbands. So I think by saying, oh, we don't want to focus on that because it's mainly men, is quite short-sighted, because it's what actually West Midlands needs, and it benefits us greatly by having those skills. Yes, we do need to also focus on areas where it's maybe a bit more balanced, or women want to go into those, but to just say, oh, well, because there's not enough women in it, we're not interested, to me is quite offensive.
Apologies if it came across that way. I didn't say we weren't interested.
You can just turn your mic off and
say apologies if it came across that way. I didn't mean we weren't interested. I just meant we have to look at all sectors. Yeah, so wasn't meant in that kind of way. We just do need to look at all of the employment sectors.
Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Kettle.
I think there's definitely an argument for getting more women working in the construction industry. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I just want to be supportive for sort of a deep dive that you suggested, Chair, just on the basis that I think in the previous item we were talking about homes policy. I bet you if we were going to go down the timber frame route, we'd probably find out we haven't got enough skilled people to put the timber frame houses up. So I think that there is sort of, you can't, if you solve one issue, you can then mean that all the other strategies can fall into place as well. So I think there's a definite argument for moving forward on that.
So Lindsay's just pointed out to me on the forward plan, July 24, we have a skills scrutiny review progress report on the implementation of the recommendations arising from the review. So if that's picked up there, and then we can see whether we feel that we need something additional to that to perhaps look at specific sectors. Yeah. Councillor Kettle.
Just a few comments, if I would listen to it. The allocation of the higher education budget, which we were informed the other day, was about something like 143 million. Affects lifetime earnings for everyone, and really this one's looking at so that, you know, where we need the improvements and where we can get people into higher education, the budget needs to be fairly flexible, far more flexible than it is at the moment, because a lot of it goes into central Birmingham, and I'd like to see the budget allocated pro rata per capita virtually, so that the lifetime enhancement is available to everyone across the whole CA area. Another aspect is the economically inactive at the moment. What was it, something like 21.4% or something in that region? 1 in 5 people are economically inactive. Is there any way we can find out how the early retirement in the public sector is affecting this figure? Because as councillors, we see an awful lot of churn, and very decent, very respectable, very interesting people often opt out at the workforce at the tender age of 55, when many more people have got to do another 15 years. And what is the impact of these people within the public sector taking early retirement? What's the distortion on the figures? And is it a valid question or a reasonable question?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think they're all valid questions. What I would say is that it's virtually negligible on our overall figures. In the inactivity figures for this region, it's a really high proportion of students given the age population. And of course, they are doing something useful. Just because they're economically inactive, it doesn't mean that they're not investing in their future. We also have a really high proportion of people, predominantly women, who have caring responsibilities either for younger children, maybe older children, increasingly for partners and parents, given the challenges in social care. And what we have seen as the labour market tightened is that those people who could go back to work often have done, and we're left with a really stubborn challenge around people who are unwell or disabled and can't access the labour market. Finally, you do have some pensioners within that group. And what I would say is that if you're on a public sector pension, then you're not the challenge to the region in the same way. And actually, it would be very hard to get them back to work because financially, predominantly people are okay there. Our challenge is for people who don't have much financial resource, who would want to work but couldn't, to give them the right support to get them back to the labour market.
I haven't got anybody else indicating to speak. So if we look at the recommendations for action and decision, I think we've done number 1, and I think the question around number 2 is, do we have enough assurances that the strategy is working, or is we expect this strategy to address the issues going forward? Did you say it was a 3-year or 5-year strategy? 3. Without having some of the background that Councillor Burrow talked about. I think we've done 3, 4 and 5. Can I just ask who sits on the performance panel? Who is reviewing the performance? Who's sitting on the performance panel to review?
Performance panel is internal.
Internal.
Yeah.
And what panel what do you have that includes local authority leads? Where do they sit?
We have an employment and skills officers group that meets monthly, that looks at, has been helping develop the strategy, looks at the issues, thematic sort of discussion each month on lots of the range of things that we're doing across the board. So through there, and then on to skills advisory board.
Okay, thank you. So just then going back to just going back then to number 2, is the committee minded to endorse the approach being adopted through the strategy to ensure the integration of employment and skills across the region, and in establishing an overarching outcomes framework to ensure regional benefits are maximised through programme delivery activity? A majority agreement on that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That takes us on to number 10 and Q3 performance reporting against the annual business plan. You'll recall, committee, that this is the second time that this has been presented to us. So actually now we'll start to see some of the RAG ratings and the assurances around the RAG rating. So over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second time a performance report has been taken to overview and scrutiny committee, and it's about performance monitoring against the annual business plan. The aim of the report is to provide members with assurance on how we manage our performance and how the information is being acted upon, particularly around those red and amber indicators. So the indicators we report by exception, so that committee members can understand the performance information in the report, because it was last reported in September. Section 2 and 3 of the report aims to provide an overview of the annual business plan, its aims and objectives, how they link into our directorate plans, team plans, and how that yearly activity is measured through indicators called high-level deliverables, or HLDs, and KPIs, key performance indicators. Beneath those indicators are weighted milestones. So they're weighted in terms of importance, and they're aggregated up to give an overall RAG status. This information is provided by exception to the executive board on a monthly basis, so they can look at deteriorating performance and have conversations with their delivery teams if needed, and cascade the information accordingly, so it has that greater visibility and transparency of data. As the performance manager, I quality assure the information before it goes to the executive board on a monthly basis, so they can be certain of the actual issues at hand. This process, along with the reports provided to executive board, were reviewed by Grant Thornton, our external auditors, in the annual review in 2023, and no recommendations were made for improvement. The report in section 4 then provides key trends and comparisons for Q3 performance by exception. Q3 data shows there are 14 red and amber indicators currently from a possible 127, which is positive because at the same period last year, there were 23. So that obviously shows an improvement compared to previously. The performance journey for the first 3 quarters is shown in Appendix 1. So that shows you the trend for the RAG status. And what you can see is because the information is calculated cumulatively, there tends to be more reds and ambers in Q2 and Q3, and obviously there may be more in Q4 potentially, rather than in Q1, as that information is added up and aggregated over the actual year. Additional detail is also provided in Appendix 2, which shows the red and amber indicators and their associated mitigation commentary, which was one of the key actions from September's meeting that members wanted. The mitigation commentary shows the progress of the project and programme in question. This information is shared with the executive board so they can decide whether further remedial actions are needed or if they feel comfortable with the indicators' performance trajectory, because implications are outside of their control, such as legislation or government delays. That's a brief overview of the performance process, along with the details of the paper and Q3 performance today. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, open it out. Councillor Tennant.
Thank you. Thank you for this. It's nice to see the breakdown of the RAG ratings, which we asked for when this report came last year. Reading through them, there's a couple there that refer to transport as British Railways as trams. Obviously, we don't cover that. Transport ONS does. Do the red RAG rating stuff, will that get forwarded to the Transport ONS for them to do the appropriate scrutiny, or are we the only committee that see those?
I mean, in terms of performance itself, at the moment, this is the only actual panel I'll provide the actual information to. Linda's got a hand.
Can I, just before I bring Linda in, I mean, it might be worth, I'll bring Linda in first and see what you're going to say before I make a suggestion. Linda?
Yeah, so the Transport Scrutiny Panel itself has its own bespoke report that's produced by the transport team that looks at the capital scheme progress delivery. So that includes obviously schemes, whether they're on target or not, and what risks are materialising. So it's a bit of a more of an in-depth report on capital scheme progress than this is. This is a sort of high-level performance report based on indicators, whereas they get a bespoke report just about the capital scheme delivery. So whilst they don't get this, they actually get a more detailed version that they scrutinise.
That's fine, thank you. Anything from anybody else? That was actually one of the questions I was going to pick up, so thank you. I have got, looking at, you've asked us to consider future work areas. If we look at page 206, number 70, the bottom one, public sector collaboration. I was talking to Lindsay before the meeting because I do recall, and I think it was going back to about either 2017 or 2018, so it's a significant time ago, where we had a particular report on one public estate and the place pilot programme. Can't remember whether it was during Ed's time or whether it was Ed's predecessor of Henry who bought that report. But I remember there being some concerns around that. And if it's still red rated, it might be worth us having a closer look at that particular area of concern for in the next work programme, if committee agrees. I would expect that the other areas I've marked, which is air quality, the smart hub capacity and the natural environment plan, would be automatically picked up in any future papers that we receive around those topics and through the climate directorate. So just ensuring that those are included, but I don't think we would probably need to have them separately. Councillor McKay?
Thanks. I might be really missing something here, so put me right, because I think we've got 4 items listed as red rated, but when you see the breakdown, is there not 5 you've got listed in red in the table, and then 4, but it says 4 above in the appendices? I'm willing to accept that I'm wrong on this, by the way, but
You're right on that table,
Yeah.
yes. So
So 107, maybe an actual typo on the actual colour itself. So I could have a look at that just to make sure, but they're all red and amber.
Yeah.
So those 40 are definitely red and amber. I could have a look at the one, I think it may be 107, just to make sure it's not, it should be amber basically.
okay, that's great, thanks.
Councillor Moore?
So in relation to this HLD 114 capital investment and the building that was sat in, I'm conscious of the previous budget meeting, there was a sum of £1 million earmarked against maintenance, I think it was, for the building. I do feel it's an area that we need to have a further look at. There's reference to a property management plan that needs to be produced. I just think it's an area we need to probe a bit further as part of maybe the work programme.
Linda?
Yeah, so certainly we can bring something back on that. I'm currently waiting for the 10-year maintenance plan for this building. It's been refreshed, and when we've had a look at that, then there'll be some options about, well, what is the 10-year requirement for this building versus any other options we've got. So when we've got that paper pulled together, the executive board will have a look at it, but certainly we can bring something here for an update.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you. Anything from anybody else? So we're asked to endorse the current approach, and I guess by endorsing it, we are comfortable that the red and ambers are being appropriately looked at and appropriately addressed through the current approach. Do we agree that? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Thank you. That moves us on then to the scrutiny protocol, and over to Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So you have a report in your pack regarding the scrutiny protocol, which was published by the government just after your last meeting, actually in November last year. And this is the second report you've received on this. Back in July, we drew members' attention to the scrutiny protocol that would be published. As I say, it is now been published and is attached as an appendix to the report. The principle of the scrutiny protocol is, first of all, it's a guidance document rather than statutory requirements. So we've termed it as it includes lots of shoulds rather than musts. But I think it's really important, well, for this committee and the combined authority more generally, because it sets out the government's view of what good scrutiny should look like in what it calls evolved organisations, so principally combined authorities, and it talks specifically about ourselves and Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which of course both had deeper devolution deals announced last year. And so the scrutiny protocol identifies 18 key principles of good governance, and that's the government's words, that it thinks will indicate a sustained culture of scrutiny that holds local decision makers to account. So the sort of thought that runs through all of this document is that as a combined authority receives more powers and has access to greater funding, then the scrutiny that the political leaders have for the work that they do should increase accordingly. So it's set out a scrutiny protocol, which say gives 18 key principles, which we can then measure our own scrutiny programme against and see where we match up well, and equally where there are gaps and we need to improve. So section 3 of the report looks at those key principles. As I say, all 18 are in the appendix, but what we've done in section 3 is draw out those particular ones, and we identified 7 where as a combined authority, we need to do a bit more work. So it should be noted, obviously, for the majority of them, we already meet or exceed the government's standards of what constitutes good scrutiny, but particularly the 7 that are in section 3, and I will go through those. There are a couple where we're not really doing anything at the moment, and I'll point those out, and then 5 of them where I think we're doing work already, but can do more. The 2 where we really haven't done anything is key principle number 5. This is a really interesting one, and I know members have talked about it during the course of the year separately. The government envisages that appointments to scrutiny committees should be for multiple years. So rather than yourself as members get appointed onto a committee, you spend 12 months getting to know the subject and the areas, and then you're replaced in 12 months' time by somebody else, and the process starts again. The government have recognised that actually appointing members to sit on a scrutiny committee for multiple years, obviously notwithstanding elections and people resigning or retiring, but the principle that you should have multi-year appointments to the scrutiny committee is obviously something that doesn't happen at the moment. But I think talking to members is something that they would support, and it will require, obviously, your local authorities agreeing to that in principle. There's no enforcement here, as I've said, but we want to have a conversation with your authorities that, again, particularly we'll be starting a new mayoral term from May, and looking for authorities to appoint members to sit on our scrutiny committees with the intention that that's multiple year appointments to just really to build on that knowledge and expertise that I know if you've sat on the committee for a number of years, you will know is really important. And then the other area I think we haven't particularly done very much at all is key principle 7, which is about inviting technical expertise. And I noted, Chair, at the start of the meeting, you talked around bringing expertise in to help with budget scrutiny, and it's exactly that sort of thing I think the government are referencing here. So we need to think about when it's appropriate to bring regional expertise in to help your committee and the scrutiny you're doing. And I think when we think back of the last couple of years, we haven't really done that at all. The other areas where we've done some work, but I think we can go further, and I'll go through these just quickly, cognizance of time. Key principle 6 is around training, and I think we can have a better training program for members. So we've done some again around budget, but we can do that better. Key principle 10 is interesting, particularly given today's meeting, is participation in pre-policy and pre-decision scrutiny. So the government really envisages a lot of scrutiny work to take place prior to formal decision making, and there's been a number of reports on the agenda at today's meeting which has demonstrated that. I think members of the committee recognise the benefit of scrutinising pre-decision, so we really need to think about that in future programming. Key principle 12, regular performance monitoring. Well, the last report is starting to point to that work. So again, it's about us being thinking of these things and when we're developing the work programme, but you can see we're starting to do that. Key principle 15 is about relationship with stakeholders, and again the committee and Chair, you've been out to a couple of local authorities this year, but we really could do with strengthening that engagement with local authorities scrutiny and thinking about how we can both complement each other's works, certainly rather than duplicate, but how we can work more closely with scrutiny that's done at a local level. And then it's perhaps helpful. Mark Smith's on the screen, is chair of audit, our audit committee, and the government have recognised at key principle 18 about the need for strong relationship with audit committees, and again, Chair, you meet with Mark, and so we are doing some work on that, but perhaps again around how audit committee can demonstrate its value on that governance part, and in an annual report is an area we might want to develop into, and obviously we'll discuss that with Mark and audit committee appropriately. So given that's how we measure up against the scrutiny protocol, like I say, I think we are in a good place. There's nothing that's in this protocol that should cause us alarm. It's about continuing the development of this committee, which has happened year on year since it was set up. In order to take those particular areas I referred to forward, and you need to want to work with members, because obviously your perspective, your expertise is crucial to this. And so we're proposing a series of workshops, both with the chair of this committee, chair of transport scrutiny, and the audit chair, as I said, to look at how we do, and then also to involve wider scrutiny members to ensure that we're capturing the thoughts and ideas that you have, having obviously sat on the committee and your experience of that. So 2 recommendations on page 209, which is to first of all to note that the publication of the protocol, which I say is in full in the appendix, and then to agree for that idea of workshops to develop the scrutiny program that we have and the way we go about scrutiny. The final thing, Chair, just before I ask any questions you members have, is to just to reinforce the importance the government have placed on the protocol, and in part of the combined authorities reporting back on the deeper devolution deal implementation. The government will want to report back on how we're implementing the protocol and the improvements that we intend to make to our scrutiny function. So this isn't something that has been published and will sit on a shelf and everyone forget about it. We do have to report back on that. So it's very much a live issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I take any questions from your committee, there's a couple of other things that are currently ongoing in connection to this. One is a member engagement deep dive, which is taking place from TDOS, which I have been sitting on as well, looking at member engagement with members who sit at the CA and how that can be improved, or where there's any gaps in that. And I think obviously training is one of the gaps that is coming up. And also just to let you know that we'll have 3 times a year national scrutiny chair and vice chair teams meetings. We're quite advanced actually in looking at this in comparison to a lot of our other comparators across the country. But from Friday's meeting, I think consistent themes are around consistency of membership and choracy. And those are certainly issues that are being flagged up across the country. So, you know, whilst we are core today, we know that has been an issue for us. So, but we're not on our own with that, but we still have to find an effective way of addressing that. So if I open it out to members for any further questions or comments on the protocol, Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. Although all 18 points are very important, however, number 5 key principle, I think is very, very important, where I think we should ask the leaders to appoint the members based on their expertise, or if they show the interest in the area of scrutiny, and also I'll wholeheartedly support the multi-year appointment, because I remember when I was first appointed, I don't know what the combined authority was, how they've evolved now, and it's take about few months to be understand, and maybe next year you'll be moved and somebody else will come in. Absolutely. And he will learn the next 12 months, and then we start from scratch again. So I totally support this, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that will be one of the key principles that we need leaders to agree and to sign up to. And as you're aware, at the last board meeting, leaders did agree and accept that they will receive regular updates as well on attendance from members. Obviously, it can be problematic for leaders if we have, you know, changes in councillor membership within their authorities. But there's also, you know, there's a thing about, isn't there, about some consistency, and then about how you bring in your next new member so that they have the opportunity to learn before they're kind of thrown in at the deep end. So I think that's something that we will definitely pick up. Councillor Kettle?
For the concur with you, Chair, no doubt about it. Last Thursday, we had people from the CA came down to Dudley, and they discussed the memorandum of understanding concerning the changes that are coming in with the devolutionary deal. And one aspect of it was that if you go through the papers, there's an inference that our MPs or the CA will be scrutinised at a parliamentary level, and our MPs should be able to, as we've discussed in this meeting on several occasions, our MPs should be here, I think something like 3-4 times a year to scrutinise what we're doing. And this is a meeting that hasn't occurred as yet, and the protocol hasn't been sorted out. This is the second year running. Are we struggling with this, or is the concept totally wrong? You know, the idea of having all our MPs in one room at the same time in a public session with members, the numbers alone are considerable. And this aspect, do we have representation of each borough? Do we have all MPs from the area? How many MPs are involved? Dan, can you tell us that?
You certainly can.
Well, what I can tell you is so you're right in what you've heard and what you think, and it wasn't part of the scrutiny protocol, but linked to the devolution process, particularly for the West Midlands and Greater Manchester, is an idea from the government that the mayor should have a Q&A session with the region's MPs, and so that means the MPs for in our case the representing area that's included within the command authority, and I think I've seen a figure that's 35 of that anyway. Now the arrangements for how these will work, but the principle is the region's MPs will be in a room with the mayor, and those MPs will hold a Q&A, perhaps similar to how this committee holds a Q&A with the mayor, and that will happen periodically during the course of the year. The intention is for a report to go to the Command Authority Board in March, which will set all the detail about how these will operate. So I would ask to kind of hold that thought until March, and when the arrangements have been developed, but they will go to the board in March for approval. And I think it's fair to say, you know, some have commented that is a duplication of what this committee has done in holding the mayor to account. You have your own views as whether it adds or duplicates, but certainly there is an intention for the government that is part of that, with greater powers comes greater scrutiny. Whilst this committee and the command authority will have its scrutiny arrangements for the mayor and leaders, the region's MPs should also take part in that scrutiny process, and the mechanism the government have suggested for that is a Q&A session where the region's MPs will sit down and field questions to the mayor, who will answer them. But March is when we will have that detail, exactly how it will be run and when it will take place and what frequency.
If I may, Mr. Chair, we were told this at the beginning of the year, that these meetings were going to occur several times a year. If you come in March, the year is over virtually, and none of these meetings have taken place. That's the very point I'm trying to get at. One, we've got no understanding of how these the numbers involved, the MPs that will come forward in the scrutiny process and take part in the scrutiny process. And two, what happened to the meetings throughout the year? And with the new protocol coming in, you're talking as though this will only apply from April 25. It didn't. It applied from last year. We haven't had these meetings, and that's the very point I made. We've lost 12 months here in this form of accountability, and it hasn't happened.
I think one comment I would make, Councillor Kettle, is that the scrutiny protocol, it's designed to be incrementally implemented from, when did it come in? Was it October, November? November. So if we're talking about an incremental implementation from November to November, then it will fall within the time frame. I think there's probably a lot of debate and a lot of questions behind the scenes about whether it's a value add or whether it isn't. But that's where we are. But it is, I think it's just reassurance around the fact that it's an incremental implementation. So it didn't all have to start in November.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. You reminded me of a point I should have said. So the scrutiny protocol was published 22nd of November last year, and within the document itself, the government recognised this isn't something that you will implement in day one, and it would envisage that the implementation would occur over a 12-month period. So there's a little bit of time to think about this and to do it properly and to do it well. And so when you're looking at an implementation period, it's sort of up until November next year, November this year, when the government will have expected you to have thought through, come up with ideas and implemented them. And that's when it will be assessing us from.
It sounds like manana.
Well, that'll be down to us as a scrutiny committee going forward. Now we've got the detail, won't it, to ask those questions. And to see what's presented to board in March, because I haven't seen that report. Okay, then, so the recommendations on this page, we've noted the publication, and in terms of firming up and looking at those highlighted areas that we as a scrutiny committee need to improve on, there was a suggestion of workshops. I mean, my suggestion, in order to make workshops manageable, I would suggest that it is the chair and vice chair of each scrutiny committee, probably plus one member from each committee, which gives us 6, and then report back. Does that feel as though that's a workable option without putting too much pressure on people who are already undertaking deep dive sessions into things? Does that feel okay? Do I have anybody who would be interested now in sitting on that as a workshop? Councillor Burrow.
I've just got an observation. I mean, I try and read all the papers. The only way I can do that is by printing them off, because I can't read them on screen.
Yep.
This time I didn't print them off because I'd have sat my printer, would have gone through every single sheet of paper I had and all the cartridges, the whole lot. Colour. Lots of colour stuff is a nightmare. I'm more used to reports that are a bit like that one, which was relatively simple, I can understand. And I think we've been swamped with paper. And I lose track of what it is I'm attempting to scrutinise. Hence, I ask questions. What's the list? What are you asking us to do today on this particular issue? And I didn't read all the papers. I just didn't have time. I went through the stuff I thought, oh, I might be able to do something on that. But I did on this issue, I didn't even read it because I got to a point of, oh, I can't handle anymore. We've got to somehow slim this stuff down, because otherwise, if we don't read it, we're not scrutinising it.
Yeah, I quite agree. I think this particular meeting pack has been exceptional in the volume and the detail, because we had the very technical report on the home strategy, and then all the tables that came with the skills strategy. And I don't know about you, but I find tables incredibly difficult to digest. So I completely agree, and I can see no reason why we can't pick that up within a working group to look at that and to make recommendations around that going forward. And I do know that leaders have also picked up those comments at board level because of the sheer volume of papers they're expected to read as well in readiness for board meetings. So fair comment, and I think we can absolutely pick that up.
Thank
you. Do I have anybody who would be interested in sitting on the working party to look at the scrutiny protocol? I've got 3 comments. Yeah. Well, you would be as vice chair. Yeah. So it's a bit one other. Councillor Kettle. Super. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do that remotely or hybrid.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So it won't matter if you're late. You won't be late then if you're on hybrid. I had to get that biggie. Okay, that's lovely then.
He did turn up.
I know, and for that I am extremely grateful. Okay, that moves us then onto the grant register, Linda.
Hi, yeah, so it's the standard report that you get. The full grant registers are attached at the appendix for information, and paragraph 2 sets out all of the grants that have been awarded since the last time we reported to you. So just for information, but happy to take any questions or feedback.
Thank you, and it's really helpful to have the recently awarded grants highlighted separately rather than it being in the table. So do I have any questions on the recent awards or on anything that's already in the system? No, so thank you, we note and accept that. Thank you very much. Work programme, Lindsay.
Yes, Chair. So within your pack, you'll have the work programme for this committee and the forward plan for WCA board. The work programme will be updated to reflect the requests made during today's meeting. So if members have anything else that they'd like to add, please do let me know and we can look at the best way the items can be scrutinised.
That's the tenant.
Yeah, so obviously in the budget just before Christmas, the US has come out hard to got into the investment zones. They're quite big, potential economic transformations, but also cross-boundary. I think particularly at East Birmingham, North Solihull, which is one of the bigger ones. I think it'd be useful for this committee to have a look at governance arrangements and how that falls in the wider CA.
No problem, we'll capture that. Whether we will get it in this year, it will probably, I think, go into next year's work programme. So I apologise in advance for whoever is chair next year, because I think we've already probably set their work programme for them. But so thank you. Any other comments on the work programme? No? That just leaves me then to thank you all for your attendance and for some really good comments, I think, in today's meeting. Apologies, we've gone over a little bit. That was due to the sheer volume of the work that we've had to scrutinise today. And I'll see you all on Monday, March the 4th at 10 AM. Thank you.
Cheers, bye.